Alright, I know there's a lot of young cats who listen to the channel and they're trying to learn about their boxing, and I'm not really going to tell you anything groundbreaking, but it's still worth knowing. The first, at least known ring casualty was a man named George the Coachman Stevenson. He fought a man named Jack Broughton. Broughton is known as the father or the daddy of English boxing. Stevenson was the first casualty after he fought Broughton in a booth that was erected in an alley off London's Tottenham Court Road in 1741. Stevenson, obviously overmatched, took a bad beating and was defeated. And defeated badly. He was in bad shape, probably in a coma or whatever. And Broughton visited Stevenson every day, but eventually Stevenson died in Broughton's arms. This prompted Broughton to start introducing new rules into boxing. The rules he implemented were later drafted as the London Prize Ring Rules or London Prize Fighting Rules, one of the two, They basically, from roughly about 1836 till 1850 something, they was modifying, chopping and changing, and formulating themselves. Like, I think back then you could do holds and sort of like wrestling shit. It was a little different. They used to have something called a scratch. I'm not sure how that works. I think maybe after one fighter is decked or some conclusion in the fight that you go back to scratch and you start again. The rules are on Wikipedia. If I remember, I never remember, I'll leave a link in the description box so you can go into depth more into that. And then from the London Prize Ring Rules, like, I'm doing a lot of this from reading. I read some of Colin Hart's articles, and some of it I'm doing from the top of my head. In the early inception of boxing, at least from a UK standpoint, it was very much a working man's sort of sport. And eventually, rich people, they wanted to watch it as something to entertain themselves. And I suppose they couldn't have it as an unpalatable spectacle. And then that's when you have guys like the Marquis of Queensberry. He steps into the picture, and he's part of an athletic club. He's a well-to-do man, of course. He belonged to the Amateur Athletic Association of England, and that was basically a club, and they published a set of 12 rules for conducting boxing matches. The rules had been drawn up by John Graham Chambers, I'm not doing anything groundbreaking, I'm just reading off Wikipedia, and sometimes it's not always reliable, but I'm trusting this source here, London Prize Fighting Rules, they used to have even spikes in their boots and things like that. I don't know what for. Maybe it must have been to kick you, to do some damage. That's the only way that man would have come in the ring with spikes, unless it was to do damage. And I think the referee, it was at his discretion to say if your spikes were either too dangerous, too long, or he could file your spikes off totally if he chose to, And that's how they used to run that shit back then. Like the London Prize Fighting Rules, it had about 20 different rules, and they're quite drawn out and long, The Queensberry rules are a little more simple, like number 1, to be fair, stand up, box in a 24-foot ring or as near that size as practical. Number 2, no wrestling or hugging or clinching allowed. Number 3, the rounds to be of 3 minutes duration and 1 minute's time in between rounds. Number 4, if either man falls through weakness or otherwise, he must get up unassisted. There are 10 seconds to be allowed for him to do so. The other man, meanwhile, to return to his corner, and when the fallen man is on his legs, the round is to be resumed and continued until the 3 minutes have expired. If one man fails to come to the scratch in the 10 seconds allowed, it shall be in the power of the referee to give his award in favor of the other man. Number 5, a man hanging on the ropes in a helpless state with his toes off the ground shall be considered down. Okay. Number 6, no seconds or any other person to be allowed in the ring during the rounds. Number 7, should the contest be stopped by any unavoidable interference, the referee is to name the time and place and as soon as possible for finishing the contest, so that the match must be won and lost unless the backers of both men agree to draw the stakes. Number 8, the gloves to be fair-sized boxing gloves of the best quality and new. Number 9, should a glove bust or come off, it must be replaced to the referee's satisfaction. Number 10, a man on one knee is considered down, and if struck is entitled to the stakes. Number 11 is that no shoes or boots with spikes or springs be allowed. And last, at number 12, the contest in all other respects to be governed by revised London prize ring rules. And basically, with a few modifications, these are the same boxing rules that exist in 2013. Obviously, we don't have the scratch. And at number 4, the man who scored the knockdown was supposed to return to his corner. Nowadays, it's a neutral corner. I don't know how that's actually transferred through the years, because if you look at some of the old films like Dempsey versus Willard, like when Dempsey floored Willard, he just stood right behind him on his blind side and waited for him to get up a little bit, and then bang, he just crashed in another shot on him. So I don't know how that's changed through the years. Well, you can see how it's changed to a degree, because after the Dempsey and Willard match, you can watch the Gene Tunney and Jack Dempsey bout, where it's a bit of a controversial fight, because, okay, let me set the scenario for you. Jack Dempsey lost his title to Gene Tunney, and this was a rematch. So Dempsey's behind on points, and once again he's being outpointed by Tunney in a rematch, but Jack lands some of his trademark power punches and he floors Tunney. Now, by this time, I think in this bout here, a fighter had to go to a neutral corner. That was just enforced, as far as I can remember. So Dempsey floors Tunney, and instead of going to a neutral corner, he does what he normally does, what he does against Willard. He's waiting for his man to get up and drum him again. But the referee keeps ushering Dempsey, go back to a neutral corner, go back to a neutral corner. So in that confusion, the referee and Dempsey have allowed Tunney precious seconds to recover. He gets back up and he gets on his bike and he carries on with what he was doing previously in this fight and the previous fight in outboxing Dempsey. And then later on he lands a 1-2 and he decks Dempsey. It's a flash knockdown, but nevertheless a knockdown. And Jack Dempsey's manager, Jack Kearns, according to Mike Tyson anyway, who's a historian, he accumulated a lot of enemies for himself and Dempsey, and they're saying that there could have been a little skullduggery there. But that's neither confirmed. It's just an interesting story. But Tunney floors Dempsey, and the referee doesn't usher Tunney to the corner. He just immediately picks up the count. He doesn't wait to see if Tunney's going to a neutral corner like he did Dempsey. So that was the first battle of the long count. And I think the one after that obviously was Tyson Douglas, But the fight carries on, and Tunney wins the fight. And I think Dempsey retires after that. But apart from the scratch and the neutral corner after a knockdown, these are basically the same boxing rules that we know today in 2013, with a few variations, I suppose, in certain countries and certain states. Obviously, we've had things like 3 knockdown rules, standing 8 counts. They're babies of the 80s. What else? Obviously, you have elbows, headbutts. In the 80s, you used to get a lot of fights ending when one fight would say he got thumbed in the eye. And I remember Larry Holmes had a couple of bouts where it wasn't obvious that happened, like against Scott Ledoux. He said he got thumbed by him, and Scott Frank, two white heavyweights who claimed that Holmes thumbed him in the eye. You know what I mean? But they've modified the glove now, so it's almost attached into one whole object, so you don't see fights ending like that these days. Rabbit punching below the belt line. I'm not sure when any reprimands came in for them. Infringements, if anybody knows, you know what to do. Drop a comment. Scoring fights, that's complicated. I don't have the times and the dates, but I'm assuming, just assuming now, like in the London prize fighting rules, that if a fight went the full distance, I'm not really sure if they would score to say, yeah, he scored more jabs than him. I'm not sure how that worked, It would probably be a draw. Maybe. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on none of this. Maybe even after the fight concluded its scheduled distance, they might let them carry on to see if one man will fall and decide it. I don't know. Even up until the Marcus of Queensberry days, it wasn't clear cut how they would divvy up points if a fight went the distance, because, as I've stated on a few occasions, newspapers used to render some of the verdicts. I'm not sure if that was days later or maybe the next day. The newspaper will say, yeah, well, so-and-so won. A lot of fights back in the day went the distance. I think it would just be rendered a no decision. I'm not sure when judging came along, because even with judging, there's a lot of different variations. Like the current system that's most common to most of us these days is you get 3 judges scoring a fight. But even today in the UK, if 2 fighters are contesting the English title, which is 1 notch below the British title, I still think the referee alone decides the contest. But back in the day over here, it was quite common. Like for British titles and just 10 rounders, that the referee was the sole judge. It would just come down to who the referee fought, won, and that's it, Come to think of it, I'm not sure about the rest of the continent back in the day, but even European fights and Commonwealth titles, if they're fought over here, 1 judge. 1 judge. That's how I remember. Well, I wasn't following boxing in the early 70s, but I've seen the Henry Cooper and the Joe Bugner fight and other fights, and that was for 3 titles: the British title, Commonwealth title, and the European title. One judge, Harry Gibbs. One of the most controversial decisions, that's ever been contested over here. So the history of scoring fights, that's maybe another video for me to do. Maybe one of you can do it, man, instead of being lazy and letting me do all the research. You do some research. You make a video, man. You know what I mean? If you go in BoxRec, you see a lot of the old fighters, you'll see a lot of no contest or no decision fights, and that's because the criteria for scoring fights back then just wasn't the same as today. If I'm not mistaken, I think even the Popo might have stopped some fights way back. I don't know in whatever locations, but I think that could well have been the case. You saw what they did when Jack Johnson was pounding on Tommy Burns, and stop the filming, you know what I'm saying? And stop the film. Yeah, the history of boxing, man. Just contribute some comments, man. And I'm always interested to learn what you guys know as well. So, peace out.